The film you are about to see represents
Freaking.com. I'm starting the recorder here.
I was just listening to Russell.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I was just listening to you and the Texas Nationalist guy.
Oh, Daniel Miller.
Yeah, that was impressive. They're further along than we are.
Well, they're somewhere. I think that they're going to get crushed if they ever get noticed. I think Cruz, Rose, Bush, etc. will crush them. But I would love for them to get somewhere.
Okay.
So,
My recorder is running now.
that's fine. I don't want this to be an official conversation, only that I don't know what direction it's going in. So, whatever. I want to meet you. I want to find out. Like, I spoke to Russell. You probably know that a while ago. Trying to find out what are your affiliations, what are you doing, and what can I do, basically, towards New Hampshire secession. Now, you're New Hampshire Exit and the Foundation?
I run nhexit.com and the Facebook page that directs to, and Russell runs nhexit.org, which is different. It's more like a blog, and then there's the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence, which last I checked, I think Carla Garrick was in charge of that, but that may be somebody else now. But Garrick is a frequent candidate for Senate. She keeps running as a Republican against the longstanding Democrat and keeps losing, but eventually she'll probably hold that seat because she's pretty determined.
Yeah, I know Carla pretty well. I tried to contact her. She says she's insane because it's a legislative session or something.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's people like me who are lazier than her, and so we have time to talk.
Okay. So basically, right now, whatever that means exactly, they put me on the board of CalExit. I'm one of the only conservatives there.
Okay.
And basically, I'm trying to figure out. Now, my heart is in New Hampshire. You've met my son Alu, right?
Oh, he and I have not met in person, I don't think, unless it was a long time ago. But we've communicated quite a bit by email over the years.
Okay. Do you live far away from him?
Probably. I'm in Winchester, which is far away from everything.
Oh, okay. Yes, he's in Hooksett.
Well, by New Hampshire standards, we're far away from everything.
Right. I had a son in Wyoming who commuted 250 miles to work. It's all relative.
Yeah.
So, like, I know a lot of the people up there, and I'm much more interested in the politics up there than I am in New York, where it's a total waste of time and energy to be interested in. But I'm particularly interested in the secessionist movements. My feeling is they would all do well to all work along with each other, at least as far as trading information. And I know, you know Daniel Rice?
No, I don't think I do.
So Daniel Rice was pretty involved in Liberty Block, and he's like the international, I'm not sure what they're calling him, ambassador, liaison, connection from the Texas Nationalist movement to whatever else is out there. And he was on the show, or on the first call with Marcus Ruiz from CalExit, and they were talking about doing a joint press release, with the idea being that a very conservative state and a very liberal state are both agreeing on the right to divorce amicably, which I personally think is a terrific idea. And I'm trying to figure out how to further any feasible secessionist movements anywhere in the country.
It is. It is. You're right. That news conference would be pretty useful. And on the other hand, I think anything that kind of helps with the initial process, that's the most important stuff. Like if you want to write a white paper on what your state's monetary policy is going to be after secession, that needs to be written, and I guess it needs to be written fairly soon. But really, ultimately, none of it matters if there's no secession, right? So it really is much more important to make the idea mainstreamed, make it respected, and make it bipartisan, multipartisan, I guess is the right word.
So I think that Trump pushed CalExit way down along the tracks, which I think is fantastic. They claim they can still get some people interested even with the new administration. I think obviously Biden being elected is great for Texit. And I believe from the millions of podcasts I listen to and the millions of things I read, secession is definitely no longer a dirty word.
Yeah, I think Brexit was the thing that cured us of the idea that secession was connected with, just the American South in Americans' minds. Now when people think secession, they do still think about that, but they also think Brexit, they think Scotland exiting, they think Quebec. There's all these different peaceable changes that have come about in the direction of secession over the years that have just started to suck more and more of the air out of the room.
So, I mean, obviously, Rush Limbaugh had mentioned the word.
Yeah, and the Free State Project was actually here in New Hampshire. This idea of moving libertarians to New Hampshire was basically the brainchild of a secessionist scholar. I mean, he wasn't a secessionist per se. He was a studier of secession movements. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
is that
so,
Sorensen?
yeah, Jason Sorens was he very early on was talking about secession as part of the conversation back in the days when it was really anathema, and I was against even talking about it. I wrote an article against it, against him, saying that this is just something that's associated with, the Confederacy. We don't want to be associated with that. But over time, yeah, the thing has become more mainstreamed, and I've come to realize that it's a necessary release valve to help prevent violence. Right? If you've got the option of pushing for secession, that's yet another obstacle between you and that moment where you decide there's nothing left to do but fight.
I totally agree on that. Totally. And we're heading in a very, very dangerous direction. And one of the things I asked with Cal Exit yesterday, didn't get a great answer, is who are the most prominent or well-known people in the country who talk about secession even generally and that support any specific movements. Dennis Prager, I believe he's the most well-known person that's actually mentioned it. I don't know if you know anybody else like that. Besides Walter Williams, who's toyed around with it. Yeah,
I've heard of him, and I was going to mention Walter Williams, and then there's Tom Woods, who has a fairly prominent podcast where he talks about it frequently.
Tom Woods, in my understanding, is not considered mainstream like you would consider Dennis Prager.
Yeah, okay.
So Tom Woods, you could say, he's a crazy libertarian, whereas Dennis Prager is as straight-laced down the middle as they come on the conservative side. Walter Williams is one of my heroes, but Prager has recently said, I'm starting to think of this as not a terrible thing. So I don't know if anybody more prominent or more well-known than he has ever mentioned the word without having to pull back.
Well, Barack Obama, actually.
When did he say that?
He had to address it because they had a policy that they had committed to. I mean, I imagine that, a president actually doing what they said they were going to do. But they had something set up on the White House webpage where if you had enough people sign a question or a petition or something like that, then the president would answer it. And there was a sufficient number of people who asked the secession question on that page that it forced Barack Obama to either answer the question or break his word. In this particular case, he chose not to break his word, and he did answer the question in writing.
What did he say? Because I've never seen that.
Oh, the usual. It was kind of like this was settled in the Civil War. It was more like a threat than an answer to the question, the way I read it. Whenever someone says that, I call that a violent threat. Because they're just claiming that might makes right, and that you can't do something because 150 years ago someone slaughtered a bunch of people.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw my two sons who made the video a few weeks ago, the tongue-in-cheek video in a British accent, apologizing to the Queen.
No, I haven't seen that.
It's cute. Anybody who says that's settled, then we need to apologize. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, when they say it's settled, they're threatening to do it again. In a sense, they're implying that they'd do it again, or their overlords that they support would do it again.
Hmm. So I agree with you.
And of course, that's all the more reason to secede. If we think they would do that, then we absolutely should secede.
Yeah, I mean, I argue about this a lot. I'm not decided on whether or not they would attack a state. I'm like 50-50 on it. I know people on both sides of that. So who are the people locally or nationally? You know, Texas is very happy because they got one state legislator to promote something. Who else is out there with any kind of a, you know, what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? Loudspeaker.
Yeah, I think Marcus Evans and the California exit folks who furthest along, next to maybe Texas. I'm not sure which of the two is further along. Obviously, if it's about a tie right now and it feels kind of like one, then that would mean that probably 2 years from now, Texas will be the country that's furthest in the lead.
I think because you know, they don't seem to have anybody, Cal Exit, that's officially, you know, statewide or anything else backing it. I'm looking for the local radio hosts, podcast hosts who are pushing for this because there's got to be people. So I look at the top tier of these people, the Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, all these guys are obviously very anti breaking up a country. But there's got to be a whole bunch of other people out there willing to talk about it. You know Andrew Wilkow?
I'm not familiar with him.
So he's got the 12 to 3 show on Sirius XM. Pretty popular guy, calls himself, I don't know, libertarian, Republican, conservative, in some order of the three. And my son and I had actually visited his show about a year ago, and he was still very, very anti. I have no idea if he's moved at all on that or if he will move at all. But I'm looking for people who can kind of, I don't know, speak louder for the movement, coalesce the movement, because there's got to be thousands and thousands of people across this country, probably way more than that, who are interested in this. And how do you get them together countrywide?
Well, I can, in terms of people with a bully pulpit, I guess actually New Hampshire might be furthest along in that one respect, because we have Free Talk Live, which is a nationally syndicated pro-secession show, and they talk about secession about every 3 days on their show, and have an audience of probably about 120,000 people per day. So it's of some value. It doesn't do everything, but it does help to mainstream the idea a little bit.
Is that Ian's show?
Correct, Ian Freeman.
Yeah, but again, Ian's a great guy, but he's fringe.
He's considered fringe, but it doesn't really matter how fringe you are. What matters is how many people hear you. And of course, that's part of being fringe, is having a small audience. But they have a big audience, so I think that actually counts. But for all I know, there may be a show or two in Texas or California that has an audience of the same size. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't mind fringe. I think George Washington and James Madison were fringe. I'm nothing against fringe. I'm just trying to figure out how do we bring a few more people into the fringe or spread the fringe out just a little bit more.
Oh, well, the simple solution would be for the thing that would actually make it happen, I think, would be for New Hampshire, or for a person to request that a state rep in New Hampshire submit a bill, or actually a resolution, favoring the idea of secession, of New Hampshire secession in principle. And the taxpayers, and this, I feel this should happen without taxpayer expense, and if that can be done, and all that happens is that there's one rep, and they just sort of submit the resolution, and it gets debated on in committee, that will get national attention, and that will turn the idea into something real.
Has that ever happened in your history?
Some things along those lines have happened. There was a bill in 2009 called HCR 6, and this was modeled on the Kentucky resolutions of the 1802 era. So it basically laid out the conditions under which New Hampshire would sever its ties to the Union. And this did draw a crowd of about 1,000 people, and a near riot on the State House, in the State House balcony. There was also I guess a lot of the people who voted against that resolution got voted out. The people who were up in the balcony screaming wound up. Some of those got elected, right? So then that created 2011, where we had that moment where the New Hampshire government, you had a sort of a conservative New Hampshire government for 2 years, and it shrank the government by 11%.
My sense is that the Republican Party is very much under Sununu's thumb.
Maybe. There's been an impeachment attempt, I think, from conservative Republicans, and there's also an attempt to roll back his COVID powers. I don't think either of those will succeed they won't succeed outright, but they may have a deterrent effect on him.
Both of those, I believe, were pretty much pushed by Melissa Blasek. Have you met her?
No, but I've heard her on your show. I've seen a picture or two of her.
She was basically crushed.
Okay, well, I mean, the thing is to go out there and fight. That's more important than whether you win or lose. Is the question of whether you fight. And because each battle, kind of like in guerrilla war, it doesn't matter how successful each attack is, but rather how many attacks there are.
The problem with that, I hear you. The problem with that is what we were talking about 5 minutes ago, the Civil War. Had they not fought that, it would be a lot easier to secede.
Yes.
Because they fought that, people say now it's been resolved. So when you fight this and lose it really badly, people say, well, that's not happening. So it can go both ways.
Maybe. But I think the reason that secession suffered at the hands of the South was because the South was led by bad guys, right? And they had a bad idea. The only good idea it seemed like they had was secession. So they had a series of bad ideas about how to run their own territory, and so that's what it was the moral compromise, the moral wickedness of the Southern government that had tainted secession, not so much the fact that they lost.
Which is what I love about CalExit.
Right.
It's very hard for liberals to oppose CalExit because they're liberals.
Yeah, it would be really nice to see. I would like to see more. I hope we can see more action in Vermont. They were pretty far along the track 10 years ago, but I think one or two of their key people died of old age or whatnot, and that set them back. And then right now.
Are you in touch with anybody in Vermont? Do you know the people there?
Not well. I feel like I bumped into some of them at Free Stater events. They'll come out. But I don't have a strong. I haven't really gotten the sense that there's that much going on with the Vermont secession movement right now, and it's gonna. And if nothing happened in the Vermont secession movement while Trump was president, then I guess nothing's going to happen over the next 4 years either.
Right. So right now I got California, Texas. You have something. I've heard maybe there's something in Wyoming, although I don't know of anything particular. There's Greater Idaho. Who else around the country's talking about it, do you know?
Feels like there was some stuff going on in South Carolina and maybe some other places. But the thing we learned as Free Staters, especially after we moved here to New Hampshire, is that it's pretty hard to move a boulder. Why try to move a mountain when you can barely move a boulder? It's better to not focus on the whole country, but just to do New Hampshire stuff and try to inspire by maybe creating that city on the hill, or by making more progress than other places have made in certain unusual directions. And so I think the way we get independence in the United States is either Texas and California start steamrolling in that direction faster than any of us can, or we do something here in New Hampshire that we actually can control.
Now, what's your relationship with Free State Project?
I guess I'd be considered an early mover. I was an early signer. I joined the project in 2002, so I guess I would have been roughly the 1,300th person to join the movement and signed a pledge that I would move. And then I moved in 2004, which made me I think, the 100th mover. And I guess now we have about, I don't know, 2,500 people who've moved.
I mean, I think Free State Project is one of the greatest ideas in history, personally. I actually thought of it myself way before I ever heard of it, and I celebrate it. It's fantastic. The idea of concentrating people in one state is my absolute number one idea. I don't want to put it down because it's done some great things. Now you got a whole bunch of you in the legislature, I understand. I don't know if it'll really move towards secession. Like I say, my impression of the current legislature is, I mean, just look what happened with that meeting yesterday.
Which one?
The one by Zoom that everybody's complaining about.
Was it in New Hampshire?
In New Hampshire. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't followed the news for the last 2 days, so that sounds like a cluster.
Yes, that's what they're calling. I mean, apparently the Republican Party shoved everything down everybody's throats, and now people are saying they want a whole new meeting and a whole new vote. It's like sometimes it's so much easier to fight when you have Democrats in charge, because there's something to fight against. When a Republican's in charge, the people in charge crush you, which that's kind of what I think is going on in New Hampshire at the moment.
That's possible. You know, we didn't when we had the conservative majority in the House and Senate in 2012. We had a Democrat governor, and so there was some gridlock, and yet they were able to drop the size of the government by 11%. I don't know how if it's going to, with a Republican governor who acts kind of like a Democrat, I don't know how that exactly would play out.
Like I say, it's much harder to fight. It'll be interesting to see if Republicans wake up under Biden, although I don't think that's going to happen. But Republicans are only awake during Democrat, terms. So now NHExit is basically a Facebook group, right?
Yeah. Oh, NHExit.com is just a glorified Facebook group. But like I said, there's NHExit.org, which is an active blog, and then there's the Foundation for NH Independence, which is more 501c3 respectable type stuff.
Right, official.
Yeah.
And now you're officially part of that.
I don't know if I don't remember. I don't remember joining anything over at the foundation. I just, I talk about whenever they do something, I just automatically publicize it, but I don't have any really close official ties. It's all very loose.
Right. So, in that sense, it's way behind CalExit and Texit.
Maybe so, yeah. But like I said, it wouldn't, because of the open nature of the New Hampshire system. It would only take one person with the desire to make the request and fund the expenses involved in hearing the bill. It costs about $2,000 to. It costs taxpayers about $2,000 every time a bill gets created, basically, or a resolution. It costs $2,000 to have it heard and killed. If it becomes law, it might cost more, it might cost less. But I have some what you might call an ethical prohibition, ethical guideline I try to follow, that I try not to do anything that forces taxpayer expense, if that makes sense. So if I were to request that bill, I would feel morally obligated to reimburse taxpayers to the tune of $2,000, and I'm not currently wealthy enough to do that. So
if somebody wants to push forward a bill to reopen New Hampshire, that costs the taxpayers money?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not a lot of money on state terms. It's basically, there's an expense for the room, for bringing, having legislators come in and work on the bill, and having the bureaucrats write up the bill, and the bureaucrats process the bill. Ultimately, I think the agreed upon figure is about $2,000. So I did submit a couple bills. I contacted state reps in 2005 and had them submit bills on my behalf, and I went and participated, and testified and tried to push those bills through as a citizen. And it was easy to do that stuff. But, a Democrat friend of mine told me, you just cost taxpayers $4,000. And I had to admit that he was right, and I kind of swore off of ever doing that again. unless I were to reimburse taxpayers for the expense.
It's interesting, but I guess if you take it out to its limit, then no one should be in the legislature.
Yeah, no one should be in the legislature. I'm cool with that idea.
Oh, okay. That's another step. You guys have some really good people in the legislature, and nobody's interested in this issue?
No, I don't think it would be difficult at all for me to persuade someone to do this. I'm just not going to make the request unless I can reimburse the taxpayers.
Okay, but so theoretically, if you could raise $2,000, you think there would be people who would put it forward?
Possibly, but I'm not a fundraiser. That's not something I enjoy doing, and so I don't do it. The reason I've been an activist for 18 years without having to stop is because I don't do things that I don't enjoy.
Right. Well, it makes it a lot easier to do them, that's for sure.
Yeah. So it is limited, and I feel like, I know I have the key in my hand, or it's not having it in my hand, but I know exactly, I think, what needs to be done for the first 2 or 3 steps. But it's not, I don't have the resources to do it.
It's funny. I was on the call yesterday with Cal Exit, and one of the people on the call is homeless.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Nice. Well, it's good that they're doing something, And of course, it's pretty easy to be homeless in California. The cost of living as high as it is.
You're practically in the majority, I think.
Yeah.
So, what can I do? What can Liberty Block do?
I think obviously, if someone wants to volunteer to reimburse taxpayers for this thing, then it can move forward. But the other thing is, I think getting the word out is useful, and I'm not, letters to the editor, promoting podcasts, promoting the Liberty Block podcast would be useful. Promoting your podcast or promoting ours, the one at nhexit.org. I think those 2 steps would be helpful because I think we have interesting content. We're not talking about something boring here. We're not people who don't know what's going on at all. We're somewhat knowledgeable about the situation, and I think we have news to share that the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about, and people do want to listen to it, but it's very difficult to get the word out about things right now.
So, when I talk to Cal Exit people, the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence is officially an up-and-running movement?
I don't know. What did they say? Did you ask?
I don't know who to talk to, except for Carla, who says she's crazy busy.
Oh, okay. No, I don't know. Marcus, I was on Marcus's show, I don't know, about a year ago, or his podcast, whatever you want to call it. So we are in touch, but I don't know how well they think we're doing. We'd have to ask them.
Ask them how they think you're doing.
It sounds like what you were asking.
Because I'm trying to find out, what are you doing? Like, if there's 10 steps, are you at step 0.5, step 1, step 2? Let's say we call Cal Exit and text it just for fun, we'll call them step 3. I don't know.
Well, they're further. I think they're further along than us by far in Texas.
Right, that's why I'm giving them a 3. So if I give them a 3, 10 is shooting at Fort Sumter, I guess.
No, that would be negative 10. That's what happens if there's a failure in this whole process. But no, I would say I'd say we're probably at 2. Just the process of just. We've mainstreamed the idea to some extent.
I mean, the foundation is an organization. It's a 501c. What is it, 3 or 4?
I don't know. You'd have to look at their website. I think it's nhindependence.org.
Yeah, I've looked at their website.
Yeah.
I mean, because by very fact that they're a foundation or a 501 whatever, that means they have to have a board, they have to have meetings, they have to do something officially.
Probably. I mean, it's a place where money can go, I guess, and then taxpayers can get you can get the tax discount or whatever. But
Right.
I don't it feels like NH Exit has been more active than them for the last 4 years. But before that, they were the only show in town, pretty much, I think.
Right, so you're kind of like their unofficial advertising arm, like.
Well, maybe. It's not like we have a lot of direct. We don't have any coordination between the two groups. It's just that whenever they do something, I try to publicize it. I'll try to call talk radio about it. I have kind of a talk radio regimen. That's my daily activism, more or less, is calling talk radio. I think I've probably made, 3,000 talk radio calls in New Hampshire since I moved here. And I talk about secession in every 10th call or so when it's relevant. And so anytime they would do something, like, I would try to call talk radio about it.
So who are the people that you call in talk radio that are in any way friendly to it?
Oh, they're not. No, they're not friendly, but they'll talk. There's WKBK in Keene. They're an AM talk radio station that has local talk programming for about 4 hours per day. And that's really nice. Most talk radio stations just spew the national stuff at you. Then there's also WMNH in Manchester, which is an FM station. There's a third station that I call into something I can't remember. But there's also, again, the main thing is that there's Free Talk Live, which is broadcasting out of Keene, and every day they air for 3 hours, roughly, all over New Hampshire. They're on, I think, 4 or 5 radio stations in New Hampshire now. So that's them. They put out the secession message all by themselves. I don't need to help. I don't need to help them.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, like I said, I'm trying to figure out how you get it slightly out of that envelope.
Oh yeah, to move it forward again, it's simple, or somewhat simple. There just needs to be a resolution before the House on the principle.
I mean, so technically speaking, the organization to raise that money or to send that money to would be the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence.
Well, if they want to, yes, they certainly can.
So in other words, let's say I'm listening to your podcast, and you're talking to Russell on a podcast. I say, wow, this is the greatest idea I've ever heard. I'm in. I'm all in. I want to write a check. You'd have to send me to the Foundation.
Maybe. I mean, I'm not sure what they would say if you wanted to give them $2,000 to reimburse taxpayers. They're probably on a different page from me, and when it comes to this question, most people are I think the whole world is on a different page from me when it comes to this question of whether it is right to submit a bill without reimbursing taxpayers.
But in other words, I'm saying, I get excited by your podcast. I'm all in. What are you telling me to do?
Well, I'm not sure that I have super specific advice for other people. I'm just telling you that what I think will work is getting a resolution in front of the State House and reimbursing taxpayers for it.
Okay, and who should? I'm just being your naive guy listening to your podcast. So, okay, Dave, you've convinced me. This is a great idea. Who do I call to do this?
I guess you could call me and offer to reimburse taxpayers. And once I know that I've got someone who can reimburse the taxpayers, then I can start making the requests.
Okay, right. So if I don't care about the tax deduction, you'll do it. If I do care about the tax deduction, do you have a vehicle? In other words, it's funny. I asked the question yesterday to Cal Exit, what's your goal and how will you know if you reached it? So I'm kind of asking you, you've been totally successful in whatever it is your mission is. What can I do? So where's the infrastructure for me to make this happen?
The infrastructure is going to be whoever calls me and makes that pledge. I'll reimburse the taxpayers. There's no need to give any money to me or anything like that. Just if someone is willing to reimburse taxpayers, then I can start calling state reps and finding one who's willing to bring the resolution forward.
And without naming names, I'm sure you have in your mind people who are more likely and less likely.
Yeah, I'd probably have to make about 10 calls before I get a yes. Someone willing to kind of step out on a limb like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, being that this is New Hampshire, I could pay in Bitcoin.
Yes, that's correct. But again, you wouldn't want to pay me. I do not want to be. I don't want to have people worrying about how I'm handling their money. However, as long as the donor is willing to directly reimburse taxpayers, they figure out how to do it. I don't know what the best mechanism would be. That's all I need is someone. I just need someone. I just need someone pledged to reimburse taxpayers. Reimburse taxpayers.
I would bring it personally to Sununu's house, but I think they outlawed going near there.
I beg your pardon?
I said I would bring the check to Sununu's home, but I think they outlawed going anywhere near.
Yeah, it does seem like they've doing. Maybe if you got a check for Sununu in your hand, they might let you through. Who knows?
A lot more than 2,000.
Yeah. So I hope does that seem clear? Am I being vague? But
No, I'm saying that's one of your specific things that you feel like would actually move it forward. So in a sense, for a lack of $2,000, we're not going that route.
Correct. But like I said, if somebody raises their hand and says, I'll do it, I'll reimburse the taxpayers, that's all I need. I can do the rest.
Right. And how do you increase the amount of people who would back such a move in the legislature?
Well, first you have one sponsor, and then after there's a sponsor, that sponsor usually goes out and finds co-sponsors just in conversation. However, I suppose I could call other state reps and request that they become co-sponsors.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you got a whole bunch of free staters that were elected this session, right?
That's correct. I heard 30, and that's new. I think we've never had more than 20 before.
Yeah, and I've heard a number bandied about, like 100 that are very pro-freedom or something.
That sounds about right.
Right. But there's no, like, official caucus of, I don't know, independence lovers, freedom lovers that you know of?
Well, there, in the last session, or maybe I think maybe the session before, maybe 2 sessions ago, there was a libertarian caucus of actual Libertarian Party members. I think it was 3 people, and they officially, changed their party affiliation to libertarians, so they were in the House not as Republicans anymore or Democrats, but as libertarians. Then we got 2 Republicans and one Democrat.
Caleb?
I beg your pardon?
Caleb Dyer?
Yes, and Brandon Finney and a third person. I can't remember who.
Yeah, I believe they were also kind of strongly opposed.
Yeah, they got ejected because they were libertarians eventually by the voters, because you can't win an election as a libertarian running in partisan races in really any state.
Yeah, that's the other fight.
Yeah, so I mean the liberty in New Hampshire at the political level has been mostly achieved by Republicans and Democrats who identify libertarian.
Right. Yeah, I know the New Hampshire people are kind of interesting in that sense. It's like this weird crossover.
Yeah.
Libertarian Democrats, Libertarian Republicans. Well, I guess because all of Vermont is kind of like that, right?
It's outside the box, to a large extent. It's liberal, but it, like I said, it has had pretty strong secessionist tendencies now and then.
And more pro-gun than liberals in New York.
Yeah, it's one of the most pro-gun states in the Union.
Right. So I'm saying it's kind of strange that way.
Yeah, it is, and in a lot of ways, it doesn't feel all that different. When you cross the border, you're obviously in a different, sort of a different state, but and it's a little bit prettier than New Hampshire. But by and large, I usually feel fairly free while I'm there, especially as a New Hampshireite.
Interesting. All right, so you guys are going to be carrying one with your podcast, NH Exit One, right?
Carrying what?
You guys are going to continue doing that NH Exit podcast?
Well, as long as Russell wants to do it, he's running it. I just concentrate on running nhexit.com, managing the Facebook group, and making talk radio calls, basically. That's kind of the extent of my involvement. But like I said, I will increase my involvement if someone raises their hand and says they're willing to reimburse taxpayers.
So I have a question. So when you call up talk radio, what is it they're talking about that you can call up and talk about secession?
Well, usually, this is the beauty of talk radio in New Hampshire. I don't find this when I visit Colorado, but in New Hampshire, there are, I guess, 3 stations you can call into where you can basically change the subject. You can just call in at certain times of day. They have like open mic type programs, and so you just call in, and as long as it's state news, you can pretty much change the subject, because at least you're not talking about something completely alien. And so anyway, I'll call in whenever there's some sort of independence-related news. I will just call in and talk about that on local talk radio stations.
And you're talking with the host, and then when you hang up, are there people calling in to respond to you?
Yeah, usually, people they can call in and respond. I usually, once I've made the call, I just wander off and go do something productive instead of listening to what everyone else is saying. I probably should be a better listener, but I don't get a very good sense of how the average person reacts, because I don't stay on the call after I'm done. But what does happen is you get a sense of how the host reacts, and usually, it's negative. But the important thing is that they're not shutting off the call, right? I'm not censored.
Right, I mean, negative in the sense that he says you're wearing a tinfoil hat, or he actually discusses it?
Oh, it's closer to discussing it usually. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to happen. What would we do about such and such? And so it's the typical kind of response you'd expect from a government, federally licensed government, monopoly radio station. Not quite a monopoly, but almost. And I mean, we're lucky in a sense in New Hampshire that we can even make the calls, right?
So, about a year ago, Alu called Mark Levin.
Nice.
And kind of mentioned that, and I have a tape of the call, obviously, and he got thrown off the call and called all kinds of names, which is one of the reasons I set up our podcast that you could actually call into, because I think people need a place where they don't get shut up.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm kind of asking about the talk radio thing is, if I knew when you're going to be on, if you had a 10-minute warning, I would try to listen, and I would even think about trying to make a follow-up phone call.
Oh, thanks. That would be great. What we need you in New Hampshire, Stephen.
My heart's there. I send my best kid there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really all my activity, and I spend a lot of time in politics. It's pretty much all New Hampshire stuff, and I come there every few months, and that's where my efforts go. I used to call talk radio a lot in Baltimore way back when. Thought it was a lot of fun to hear my voice. But I think it wouldn't hurt to have it. The fact that I live outside of New Hampshire, if I'm calling, I mean, do they care where I'm living if I'm addressing a New Hampshire issue? Okay,
so at WKBK, it doesn't matter because they don't have a call screener. So you just call and they say, all you do is call their call-in number, and if you're sitting there for the long enough period of time at the right moment in the day, usually 6:20 a.m. or 9:15 a.m., then you just get automatically put through with no screener. They just say, "Welcome, caller. What's on your mind?"
Right. So theoretically, if you were to call up in the morning and bring up this subject, theoretically I can call 10 minutes later and say, "Hey, regarding that nut who just called you, I want to talk about this."
Yeah, you could probably do that. I get on the air about once every 4 days on WKBK. And it's hard to predict when I'm going to get through. I can call at 6:15, can't get through. Call again 9:15, get through. Next day I call 6:15, I get through. Next day I call 3 times and never get through. So it wildly varies. I guess I should say it varies, but not wildly.
Is it fair to assume they broadcast over the net as well?
I think that they have a net. They have a net broadcast.
So here's what I'd like you to do. If we think of one concrete thing, never around Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's gym day, but Tuesdays and Thursday mornings, the 9:15, 9 to 9:30, 9 to even 10. If you're going to call and you shoot me a message, I would for sure listen, and I would follow up.
Okay. Yeah, let's try that. It's it could be a little complex, but it'll get simpler the more we do it. Although
I don't mind listening and not being answered. I got plenty to do. That's not a problem.
okay,
I would just sort of monitor it, and it's interesting. So Alu's never called into those places, as far as I know.
yeah, we all have the things that we do and we enjoy doing. I haven't run for state rep seriously like he did, right? And so he. I really appreciate him going out on a limb to do that. But on the other hand, I make a bucket load of talk radio calls, and most people don't. So, we each are filling our niche here.
I think he would enjoy doing it. I don't even know if he knew this was a thing.
Yeah, I should send you both the schedules that I have worked up. I send those to other people too. And that way we'll all know what the moments are and the numbers are, what time, what number, what show you can call into.
Like I say, Tuesdays and Thursdays, if you're thinking, hey, I may call today, you send me a thing, I most probably can listen in and possibly follow up. And I think Alu could on some of those days too, which would, then it almost sounds like there's a movement, you got 2 or 3 calls. Wow.
Yeah, and is Alu Elliot? Did he change his name?
Alu's his nickname.
Oh, okay, all right, great. I wasn't sure if
I know you got kids. It's hard to call your kid by his real name.
Yeah, I've started thinking that maybe there was someone else besides Elliot and you out there. And I guess there is, because Elliot, you mentioned Elliot's brother. So.
Well, his other brother's name was Eli, and that was confusing, but he changed it legally, so it made it slightly easier.
Okay. All right. Yeah, let's do it. Thanks I really appreciate the focus on, that which is concrete. It's something that can actually be done, even if it's not huge. At least it's something.
No, I think talk radio is a great thing. That's why I keep asking who is out there that you can talk to, because, again, that gets it slightly out of your circle, and, it begins with 1 nut, and then 2 is a little bit less than a nut, and 5 is already something, and so I think talk radio is a great thing to do. And I'm always looking, like I say, for the local hosts who are less opposed to this whole idea. And there must be a bunch of them somewhere in this country.
Well, it's possible. I mean, I think you probably have, hosts in the West, in Nevada and Wyoming, in the rural areas where they've been, messed with by this Bundy situation. The feds have trampled on them, and the public sympathy is anti-federal. You probably would find radio shows out there that are even more accessible than the ones in New Hampshire. But those states are just so big that one individual can't change them very much. Wyoming, I guess people could change it, but no one ever goes there. No one ever. I mean,
you're very well hooked up in Wyoming.
Pardon?
We are very hooked up in Wyoming.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
One of my sons lived there for years, and we have people in Wyoming.
Okay, yeah, that's good. But I don't know. I haven't found anything yet that seems more successful than the New Hampshire Freedom Drive. The movement toward freedom in New Hampshire has been, less unsuccessful than all of the others, as best I can tell.
Right. So on that plane, I totally agree. On the other plane of just getting people talking about it anywhere.
Yeah.
Where I can meet somebody in a grocery store and say, hey, what do you think about secession? Just getting people talking about it. I'm calling it peaceful separation, peaceful divorce. Secession has a bad connotation. But I think the more people talking about it, again, would I put $2,000 into somebody talking about it in Wyoming? Maybe not. But if I could get more and more people talking about it, I probably would.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's useful to have people talking about it in Wyoming, but I keep going back to the... I was in Bosnia during the Balkan Wars, and Slovenia and Croatia, and I speak the language, and the key thing that I learned was that you do not want to be the last one out the exit, right? You want to be the first one out the exit, and you can see like in Slovenia they had 20 deaths in Croatia, they had 10,000. They were the second republic to leave. Bosnia was the third republic to leave, and they had 200,000 deaths. And so it's the same process. When Estonia left Russia, they were just about the first one out. They did great. Chechnya was the last one out, right? And how did Chechnya do? So I want New Hampshire to be the first, if possible, the first republic out of this union. And I'm not going to focus on Wyoming much.
I mean, I like New Hampshire over Wyoming because Wyoming is landlocked. It's very spread out. New Hampshire, everybody's very accessible there. I can meet 10 legislators in a grocery store.
Yeah.
Wyoming, I got to drive 500 miles to do that.
Right. And
that's why New Hampshire is my favorite.
The other problem, the reason I voted, when we decided which state us libertarians were going to move to, we had a vote back in 2003, and I had been initially favoring Wyoming because it has such a low population, and I prefer that climate to the New Hampshire climate. I went and scouted Wyoming, visited it and everything, to see whether I was going to vote for Wyoming or New Hampshire. And I was drawn to the conclusion, despite my bias in favor of Wyoming, I had to vote for New Hampshire because the numbers just added up. Everything added up in New Hampshire, and it didn't add up in Wyoming in terms of just having people in the same place and affecting change for freedom.
Mm-hmm. Well, I lean towards New Hampshire, but I sent one kid to each state.
Yeah, that's great. Well, there are some good things going on in Wyoming. I also understand there's some positive Bitcoin legislation out there. Trace Mayer, I think, lives there, and a few liberty activists live there. But I don't know. I think
Wyoming's problem, from my feeling, is they're so free they don't get it, and there's just no push to stay free. Now, so Lynn Cheney goes out on her limb, they wake up. But generally speaking, there's no threat to any kind of freedom out there, so nobody cares.
Yeah, I think you have hit it pretty much on the head there. I would have put it differently. I think there's this phenomenon I call Colorado freedom, or I guess I should call it New Hampshire freedom, and there's a phenomenon I call Wyoming freedom. And Wyoming has freedom because it has so few people. And when the people get there, the freedom will be gone, possibly. But in Colorado and New Hampshire, the people are already kind of there, and yet it actually, when more and more people move in, it actually helps a little bit because they tend to be pro-freedom people who are escaping California or escaping Massachusetts. And we have statistics and polls that almost prove this in New Hampshire, that our immigrants, at least the ones from nearby areas, seem to be helping out in terms of freedom.
So New Hampshire has an advantage and a disadvantage. Is freedom there is very much under threat. Your legislator goes back and forth.
Yeah, well, of course, I mean, you could be under threat and have Republicans in charge. That certainly happens. But it does seem like in New Hampshire, the Republicans actually are a little bit more pro-freedom than the Democrats, which is not really the case in Washington to any clear extent.
I'm saying, because you're under threat in New Hampshire, you guys are aware of it and I think fight. Whereas Wyoming, there's no threat. Even though the cities in Wyoming, move further and further left, as small as they are, because the college town, forget about it, Jackson Hole, forget about it. So, but again, the average guy doesn't feel it in Wyoming. New Hampshire, to me, is you guys, if 10,000 people moved in because Mike Bloomberg paid them to move there, you'd be in big trouble.
That's, I don't know, because if that happened and people knew it happened, that would probably tend to create a backlash. We had to be really careful when we moved here as libertarians who supposedly match the state's traditional identity anyway. We had to be pretty careful that we didn't ruffle too many feathers unnecessarily. And that it's interesting how welcoming the state has been compared to how any other state would have been. It's not always welcoming, but
some of the comments people make about free staters, and it's almost like you're insurrectionists or domestic terrorists.
I'm sure some people say that kind of thing, but it's a lot milder here than it would be if we had moved to Delaware or North Dakota or something.
Listen, I think you're a great state. That's why I put my energy there.
There was this discussion back in 2001 when the Free State, the very first 48 hours of the Free State Project's existence, when they first had their Yahoo group, they were about 50 or 60 posts, during that 2-day period. And I've gone back and looked at it kind of for historical interest sometimes. And it's interesting how within just those 2 days, it was obvious that this race was going to be New Hampshire's to lose. I mean, the state just kept coming up in conversation for that, for post after post. And usually your first impression, your first instinct is the correct one. And theirs was, and mine wasn't, because I was leaning toward Wyoming. But the instinct of the average Free Stater during the first 48-hour period was correct.
I think it saddens me that I've talked to people across the country who either never heard of it or thought it was defunct. I think there's some better stuff been going up lately. There was a great video the Free State Project did that I saw, and some really good posts. So I'm not complaining about them. I wish everybody in the world heard of them.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's the least bad freedom movement in the world. It has plenty of its own problems and plenty of its own frustrations and things it has not accomplished and whatnot. But you just have to look. You just Google, which state is the freest state, right? Which state is the lowest crime? Which state has the best gun laws? And the fewest gun laws and on, just all those states. New Hampshire is almost always in the top 5 on every metric, and it's usually, number 1 or number 2 on the freest state rate rankings.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely know that.
And that's despite the fact that it has a much higher population density than Wyoming or North Dakota or South Dakota.
Is it, slightly over 1 million people?
It's 1.5 million, and that's a low population, but it's nothing like Wyoming, yeah.
A lot bigger than Wyoming. All right, listen, I appreciate your time, Dave. Keep me in the loop. Let me know what I can do for any of your projects.
Thanks. Yeah, that's just such a wonderful question to hear, and I really appreciate you asking it. I will probably email you some options in terms of how we might collude and liberate an FCC tower for 10 minutes instead of 5.
Okay, yeah, listen, New Hampshire's my number 1. Secession's right up there next to it. So let me know what I can do.
All right, thanks, Stephen.
Take care, Dave. Bye-bye.
You too. Freaking. .com isn't freaking.com. Do I even need to tell you what it's about if I'm singing such an awesome song? Freaking.com.